Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sean Hayner from the Customer Success team here at Hibob. It's great to have all of you join us today. We're going to give it another minute or so just to let some last-minute folks dial in before we get started. And as soon as we have a few more people in, we will get going. Okay, perfect. Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Fall into Hybrid Work, Creating Attractive and Productive Workplaces. We would like to thank Workable for partnering with us on today's session as well. During today's webinar, we're going to go over how to manage employee productivity across the employee lifecycle, tips for effective goal setting and setting employees up for success, some best practices to balance engagement across in-person, hybrid, and remote workers, and last but not least, metrics to measure targets, goals, and culture. So I do want to take a quick moment just to tell you a little bit about Hibob. So the Bob platform is a modern, forward-thinking people management platform, and it's a system of engagement designed to meet the unique needs of modern, mid-size, and multinational businesses. So no matter where you or your employees are in the world, Bob allows you to automate and scale HR processes, develop your people and connect your teams to help your organization and your employees grow faster and stronger as well. So currently our global team serves over 1,400 customers across more than 100 countries and collectively over 100,000 employees plus around the world. We do truly feel fortunate to help drive and support employee happiness by delivering exceptional employee experiences. So right now, HR is in a very fortunate position to strategically lead their business to adapt and thrive as remote and hybrid work becomes a normal way of operation. Through guiding and empowering managers to lead their teams, driving communication and engagement initiatives that build strong culture and bring strategic insights to light, HR leaders can directly impact the success of the business and solidify their standing as a strategic driver of business performance. So we're also going to look at Workable here. So what is Workable? Workable is where the world hires. They've helped 20,000 companies hire over 1 million candidates. And what makes Workable different from other applicant tracking systems is that they take the intelligence of those 20,000 companies, making those 1 million successful hires, and build it back into Workable. So with Workable, you can find great talent, evaluate that talent in a fair and consistent way, and you're able to automate the process so that it's done quickly and in a way that works for your business. If you've got all three of these things working in harmony, you can reliably get to the 5 good interviews that you would need to make a great hire. And the subject that we're talking about today, the world is changing. 20 years ago, it was the age of the company. 10 years ago, it was the age of the customer. And now it's the age of the employee. The market for candidates is significantly more competitive. Traditional companies are now competing for talent in roles that didn't exist 5 years ago. And the face of that talent is changing as well. Baby boomers are retiring, and they're being replaced more and more by millennials and Gen Z within the workforce. These candidates currently have choices, and they know it. In March of 2021, Bob conducted a global workplace study with the intention of understanding and evaluating the effects of the pandemic on people in the workplace. We surveyed 1,000 full-time employees that worked from January of 2020 through April of 2021 in order to understand the effect that their self-reported mental health and well-being had on their productivity. One of the main questions that we asked was, what do employees think hybrid work actually is? And the answer is, it means totally different things to different people, so being flexible is key here. When we asked, do the benefits of hybrid remote work outweigh the cons, 80% said yes. Hybrid is global and diverse, and it's our job to make sure that we adapt and rise to this challenge. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it to today's panelists to quickly introduce themselves before we start the panel discussion. Avia, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. So I'm Avia Messer. I'm head of HR and talent at Powtoon. For those of you who don't know, Powtoon is a visual communication platform that it actually means that anyone can create videos and presentations to communicate better across the organization. We're 100 employees. We're global from Tel Aviv, London, Kiev. I've been at Powtoon for 4 years, and I actually got promoted into my current position as COVID began. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, Avia. Avra, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the audience next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Avra Bossov. I am the Senior Employee Engagement Administrator at STR. We work in the defense space developing different engineering systems and technology. And I have been in my role for just a couple months here, so I've learned a lot about STR and about really doing this work in the age of COVID.
Awesome. And last but not least, Hung.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Hi, everybody. My name is Hung Lee. I curate an online community called Recruiting Brainfood, which I think some of you might belong to. So hello to all of the members there. If you're there, great to see you. If you're not, you should be a member. And I look forward to having a conversation with these fine folks today.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And now we're going to get started with the discussion. Okay, so the first question that we have is how has the hybrid work model been going for your organization? Avia, we'll start with you.
So I do have to say that in the beginning, it was hysterical. That's the best word I can use. Everybody was hysterical, managers, employees. I was hysterical. And as time went by, we got used to it. The shock went down. And actually, people felt more productive. Coming back to the office, people even preferred staying at home, and finding now the middle ground raises challenges like IT equipment, events, welfare manners. So we're finding ways to close these gaps. Since we're Powtoon, we're using video communication, but it's not an easy one. There's gaps to close all the time.
Okay, Avra, do you want to jump in as well here?
Sure. So hybrid work at STR, we've always been fairly flexible, and with the onset of COVID in March 2020, we obviously went home. And then we've had mission critical staff come in to do their technical work, since we do employ a lot of engineers, and in the secure space, there are certain places that you can do your work. So that's been an interesting, feat to have employees really all across the country. We have multiple sites, so that has always been a piece of the puzzle of being hybrid in some way. Obviously, COVID accelerated that and changed how we do events and other culture and employee experiences. But overall, it's one of those things where we've been really fortunate to have a really great team behind putting on virtual events, and this summer starting to go back in person. And it's been, I think, a real testament to the power that intentionality and wanting to take care of your employees. I think it's just been a testament to that in terms of the hybrid model being successful.
Awesome. And Hung, what about you?
Yeah, so my take's slightly different in the sense that, I guess my information is really drawn from conversations with the community at large in terms of how they are dealing with this shift to a shift of mode of work. What's been clear to me is that different companies, often based on industry or even function, are adapting to this hybrid model in different ways. It's very clear, for instance, that when everyone shifted to a remote setting, the companies that were primarily knowledge-based, their output was primarily knowledge-based, they coped a lot better with the shift of mode compared to an organization that had a mixed mode, where they were producing either physical items or they needed people to physically deliver a service. And I think this kind of move into hybrid will have a similar type of sort of situation, in the sense that style of company you are, the output that you produce to the market is going to have a big impact as to whether hybrid is really going to work out for you. I've got to be honest, I'm a bit of a skeptic with the hybrid optimism, let's say. I think we're very enthusiastic at this point and very optimistic, but I think we'll encounter some pretty self-evident issues with the hybrid model, which hopefully we'll talk about in a bit. And it will suit some companies to do this, and it will suit other companies less well. And those companies that I think suit less well will have to make a pretty tough decision as to whether they call back on premise or whether they decide to go full gun and shift to full remote.
Awesome. Next question here. So what are you paying extra attention to now that the employees are back in the office? Avia, we will start with you.
So I'd say we're paying extra attention to, when we're in the office, we have more gathering and more events, even small events that we just like gather all for ice cream or just sit on the bar together and have breakfast. Because the time in the office should be, we believe that the time in the office should be social time. Everybody's speaking about it, that coming to the office, then when they go back home to work at home, then they need to fill in the gap from the day that they were in the office socializing. And I think it's fine, and it's a great balance. So we're paying extra attention to gathering, welfare events, fun events, and embracing that social time.
Awesome. Avra?
Sure. So, I mean, I think empathy has been definitely a buzzword throughout 2020, and I think that's important to continue in 2021, right? We are still dealing with COVID. We are still dealing with a lot of racial injustice. We are still dealing with, a lot of those challenges of how we have working parents and how, all of those factors in our lives are really affecting our work. So still paying extra attention to empathy. I mentioned intentionality before, definitely that, right? So if we are having a virtual program, what are the tools that we can use and the strategies we can employ to really make sure those are a good use of our employees' time? Of course, to be fun, and of course to foster those connections as well. And then really agility as well, right? So this idea of no one knows what the future holds, and the past 18 months have certainly articulated that for us in real life, but making sure that whatever plans we are making, right, we're so excited to see each other again, we're so excited to, continue having these different events, but making sure that, if things, especially with the Delta variant, kind of come to a halt again, how can we continue to be agile with our plans to engage our employees?
Got it. Awesome. Hung?
Firstly, I want to say I love the kind of position that Powtoon have gone to, where the in-office experience is primarily if you're like non-productive. It's there to actually produce culture. It's there to build relationships and to kind of build that kind of sense of belonging, rather than grinding people and forcing them to get busy, so to speak. So I think that's a really a smart way to think about it. I think it's really difficult for any manager to deal with this, because they are also part of this situation. They're also people that have the challenges of juggling backwards and forwards. I think what's interesting is how we react to the government mandates. You've seen some situations where, if it's been a pretty clear shot where you've had a single lockdown and then you're not locked down anymore, it's basically just one shift, a shift out and then a shift back. And it seems that that's not that disruptive, so to speak. a lot of the folks I'm speaking to based out in Australia, for instance, they're oscillating between lockdown, not lockdown, lockdown, not lockdown. And it's been like 3 cycles of that already. And if you imagine that type of oscillation that you have to go through, that's going to be hugely disruptive because you're essentially switching modes and reorganizing your life based on, what may be a 2-3 week shot, 6 week shot, whatever it might be. So then you factor in, essentially what Avra said, all of the life circumstances of your employees. Do you have kids that you need to think about? Are you caring for people? What is the commute looking like these days? How easy is it for you to do these types of oscillations? I think it's just a huge challenge for all businesses. I think the term I'm hearing in HR and TA is essentially this kind of whole person management, holistic management. Is that what we need to get to? We can no longer kind of treat employees as just that person in, producing for the office. We have to think of every part of that person's life and how these types of shifts really impact them. So I guess extra attention has to be paid not on the work that this person does, but on the worker that's doing the work, the human being that's doing the work for you.
Got it. Okay, so moving on to the next question here. How are you promoting hybrid work culture to attract and retain talent? Avra, we'll start with you.
Sure. So one of the things, really going back to being flexible, right? So we have some employees who have started remotely, who have onboarded remotely. We have some employees who are onboarding in office. And, no matter where our employees are working, it's one of those ideas that we will take care of you, right? So making sure folks have the right workstation setups and technology behind them to be able to be as effective and productive as possible. As far as attracting talent, right, so that was the retaining talent of continuing to be flexible. We've been using social media to promote all of the different events that we've been having to our employees. Not a revolutionary idea, but definitely a helpful one to just get the word out on, we're more than the work. We are really placing an emphasis on our culture.
Awesome. Avia?
So even before COVID, we really emphasized the DNA when recruiting. But now I think when recruiting, there's a lot of emphasis on the ability to be agile around the hybrid working. If that makes sense, because it's from Tel Aviv, it's just rolling with the punches, going in and out of lockdowns. So it's just being super agile. When I promote the hybrid working, I tell candidates that we work 2 to 3 days in the office and some from home. And we do treat each case individually, and I think that's the most thing to emphasize. Another cool thing that we did is when things were open here for just a short while, we did an event and we had everybody bring their +1s for the first time. And I think that really affected retaining the employees, bringing their families to the office space where we had a great party. And that, for the first time, there was like a short time where we can do that. And so I think it's being like really creative these days. Nothing is simple.
Hung?
So I want to say something which probably not anybody's going to like, but I think it needs to be said. I'm not sure we should try that hard to attract and retain talent as an objective. And the reason for this is because if that is the goal, we're going to end up doing things that isn't true to how we're going to behave as a business. In other words, if we work super hard to attract a huge amount of people coming to our jobs, coming to our career pages, for instance, all we have to do is say stuff like, this is super remote, super flexible. You can choose what the hell you want to do. I've just launched a job board as an example for this. And it's very clear that the applicant rate for jobs that are super flexible are something like 10 times higher than the ones that are pretty much, hey, on premise, it's, this is how you're going to be. Now, I'm thinking that's all well and good. But firstly, you have to be really clear that that's your commitment. So if you're saying remote, you need to be super clear what you mean by that. Are you remote in terms of fully distributed? There is no office. You literally are working remote, distributed where you are. Is there an office? In which case, what is the expectation for the applicant coming in or the future employee? Are we saying remote, but what you've got to do is apply for a remote day or something like that? Do the employees have a choice? Or is it fixed? Is it the Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday in office type of deal? So two things I would say with this comment, Sean. I would say, number one, you have to be clear. So you need to establish what the heck you mean by remote or hybrid, and commit to it. So the second point is you then got to commit and deliver to that, and not be in that situation where you've left it vague, because you're going to get a bunch of people coming in that have a different perception as to what the words and what the term means. And they may feel shortchanged if they think, okay, you said remote, but now you're telling me actually it's 3 days in the office. And suddenly I've got to juggle my life around. So two things, got to be clear and you got to commit.
Perfect. Okay, so moving on to our next question here. Remote work productivity looks different than in-office productivity. How can managers help employees feel productive in both environments? Avia, we'll start with you on this one.
I'd say that going to the office, it's really important to do in-person meetings, managers with their employees, and take the time to spend that time together, and then allow, when working from home, time to actually be productive and do the work and not the meetings. People learned a different kind of time management, and they're speaking this language. We'll have a meeting in the office. When we're in the office, we'll take the time to have the meeting. And I think it's great. Everybody's like catching up really fast about it. Again, communication is key to keep, tracking employees' productivity. And then all ways of communications, even if it's like recording a video, just explaining in a few words what you did, where you got stuck, and sending that to your manager. I think that communication is key in this place. I hope that answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Avra?
Yeah, I think communication really is key, and it's keeping in contact with different ways, right? Are you doing, ad hoc, hey, are you free for a second, virtually or in person, right? Are you trying to make sure that you're definitely like having your regular check-ins, but also making space for those kind of ad hoc communications as well? I think also just in terms of, Avia, you were kind of mentioning this, but the kind of work we're talking about, right? The kind of productivity. Are we being productive in our tasks and deliverables? You might be better at that in the office. You might be better at that at home. Are we talking about productivity in terms of building that culture and having those relationships form and bloom and really prioritizing those as well? I think there are different ways to be productive, and it's just going to depend. And again, that goes back to the importance of flexibility, and for managers to keep that line of communication open no matter where employees are.
Absolutely. Hung?
Once again, Sean, I'm going to critique the question. You might want to kick me off the show at some point, man. I totally understand if you wanted to do that. So I think it's a wrong question. I think managers should get out of the way. This is actually strikes me as needy management, which I believe can actually be very counterproductive to employees' happiness and well-being, as well as their productivity. Like one of the outcomes that's very clear is that the frequency of meetings is actually increased as a result of us shifting to remote. And you wonder why that is, because no one really enjoys having like completely packed calendar where you're just back to back to back to back to back to back to back with these Zoom calls. Why is that happening? There's no work going on in those conversations. What's happening is that managers are checking up on employees because they're concerned, without the line of sight experience, without the sort of being in office, whether people are working or not. I think that's a terrible scenario to be in. So I think the way in which managers need to deal with this is basically accept that their visibility has gone down and just trust that their employees are going to deliver to it. The good thing is most of the shift to work is also a digitization of what were previously analog activities. So there's going to be much more data available for managers to make productivity related decisions. And that's a good or bad thing, by the way. Like, that can lead us down a different track of, are we comfortable with this or not? There was actually a really funny story from us looking from the outside, but there was this gaming studio, I think in Russia, where the CEO made a mass redundancy based on his analytics of people's productivity on their communication data. So in other words, he was checking up on, okay, how many people are on chats, how many people are on Slack, how many people are adding to the wiki, how many people are doing stuff that I don't think they should be doing. Okay, these folks are now fired, 150 people. And it was like, holy crap. Like, that is maybe a way to do it, but that answers the question as to how you manage productivity at least one way of doing it, in the sense that you're not checking up on people, but you're relying purely on the metadata that people are producing, because all work is now digital. So I would say this is a very interesting kind of period for all of us. I think that managers can be counterproductive by being too much in the employees' faces. We have to use the information and the data is available. But again, we have to be very careful with those types of outcomes. Do we want to create a situation where it's entirely data driven? That's a question for maybe another day.
Got it. So it sounds like a big piece of that there is focused around the employee trusting in your employees.
I think you have to. I mean, one of the things with remote, like one of the key criteria for being a successful remote work employee is your ability to self-direct and self-manage. Fundamentally, that's going to be the top priority. If you're hiring someone coming forward and you're a remote or a hybrid type of environment where your employee is likely to spend time by themselves working, their ability to self-direct and self-manage is going to be one of the top things you're going to check during the assessment of that candidate. Now, there's going to be a bunch of people that can't do that. The reality of it is there's some people that actually need and want to have management. And they need and want to be on premise. Well, we need to configure jobs so that those folks need to be in the office. And if that's not something in play, then you need not to hire those people, or indeed you need to let those guys go because it's not suitable for the company that you have now and going forward. So it's going to be very interesting. I think it's a big shakeup of the skills that we need. I don't think we can expect everyone to comfortably or optimally adapt to these changes, and we should be prepared that attrition is going to happen, and maybe that's not always a negative thing. There's going to be a guaranteed kind of flow of people towards organizations that are best suited to the way in which they prefer to work.
I would also add really quick, before we go on to the next question, we also have to equip our managers to have those tools at their right. Like it can't. I'm hesitant to put the onus only on employees, right? We as organizations and in the HR space really need to be able to train and develop our managers to suit that as well.
Avra, just to support that comment, the managers have zero support on how to deal with this. And you know what I mean? Zero support. Most managers are actually individual contributors that were elite individual contributors that were simply promoted up. And they were told, look, you're good at this job. You can train other people, sit next to those folks, and they'll just by osmosis get good stuff out of you. And now suddenly he's remote managing or she's remote managing, totally different skill set.
That's true. Let me just add to that, please. But that's our place as HR managers and HR people to help them out and ask the manager, when is the last time you asked this employee about his family life? Do you know what's going on with with him at home? Did you ask him lately? And this is really our part as HR to remind managers all the time, again and again and again. I think it's our part to push that way.
Perfect. So we are going to move on to the next question here. How do you create a culture that's inclusive of both remote employees and those that come into the office? And Avra, we'll start with you.
Sure. So, I mean, from a point of personal privilege, I think diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging should be a part of everything we do at work. And inclusion, especially now with hybrid work, includes those who are in the office and those who are not. STR, we have 5 sites at this point. So we've been growing really rapidly. And one of the things that we are fortunate to do is have the right technology and the right resources and really lean on our IT partners to make sure that our conference rooms have Zoom screens, right? Or that every meeting that we host has a Zoom call-in option so that no matter where folks are, they can participate and really feel included in that. And then as far as, our events and connection opportunities to be inclusive of employees no matter where they are, to, again, have those virtual options and to set aside. Sometimes we are going to only be in person for this kind of event, right? If we're doing a group lunch, sometimes we are going to be virtual so that everyone can participate if it's, a later in the day kind of event, like a trivia night or something like that. So it's really just meeting people where they are and really taking that inclusion lens to everything that we're planning.
Awesome. Avia, would you like to jump in?
Yes, we also have a few sites, as I said, Israel, London, Kiev, and I think before COVID, it was always HR responsibility, mostly managers' responsibility to make sure that the remote people feel inclusive and part of everything. And I think now with COVID and hybrid working, I think now everybody understands, even people working at headquarters, understands what it means to be the remote person outside of the office. So now there's an understanding of the other locations, and it's now everybody's responsible to make every person who is remote and not physically in the office feel part of everything. And I think that's great, because before that, managers always needed to remind everybody, hey, don't forget the remote team, don't forget we have people in Kiev. And now everybody's part of that, thinking about who's been left out, how can we, and it's now something that everybody shares.
Awesome. Hung?
Every question I'm going to say something people aren't going to like, Sean. So if the view count goes down, I take full responsibility, okay? I beg your pardon. So firstly, I think that we need a third space. We need a third space that is neither remote nor in person, that both parties can equitably enter in order for that inclusion to actually occur. One of the big problems we have with hybrid, two sets of people working in different ways, is that fundamentally the information will flow differently. And the folks that are going to be remote will have less information overall than the folks that are in the office. There was actually a really interesting example pre-COVID of a company that actually went hybrid. They did this experiment. They said, you know what, we do have a cool office. We're gonna, make sure people are happy to be here. But you know what, you don't have to turn up to the office. We trust you to work from remote. And they had a really interesting rule, which sounds crazy for us now. But basically, they banned in-person meetings. Just ban them. Wow. You cannot have an in-person meeting, even if you're sitting in the same office next to your person you want to have a meeting with. In order for you to have a meeting, you both need to take your laptops, go into separate rooms, and do a Zoom call or do something that is video only. And the reason why they made that commitment is because that made it suddenly, it equalized the communication channels. So anytime there was any kind of meeting, it had to be accessible to someone who wasn't actually in office, in premise. A company called Each, which is a Parisian business, I think the Parisian version of Uber. I'm not sure whether they still do that, but I think it's a really interesting test case of a company that recognized very early on that if you had the in-person meeting and you also had the video meeting, the in-person meeting, you're always going to get more nuance. You're always going to get more information. It's the in management school, they'll talk about the meeting after the meeting. Yeah. When 10 people actually get in person, they talk about it, but what happens in the water cooler afterwards, where they start, bad mouthing the presenter or saying, hey, listen, that dude was a complete whatever. That meeting after the meeting is where the real information is exchanged. So you had this crazy situation where, okay, totally irrational, but people were sitting in the same office. They just could not have that meeting. They had to go to these remote-only style. Anyway, point is, I think in order to be truly inclusive, another way to do it is to get to a third space. And we talked about it earlier in the show, where you have this kind of halfway house where it is sort of like a Zoom call, but it's also a place where people can digitally be. And this is a product, similar products like this exist, but I want to just introduce this one. I think it's quite cool. It's called Gather. It's essentially like a floor plan app, but it means that you can actually have a character on the screen at all times. And you can wander around on this floor plan and interact with folks as if you were there. And that's your primary place where you have communication. So you're almost saying to the people that are in the office, you know what, we prefer you to have your talk here, so that it becomes accessible for all. Sounds crazy, but we're in crazy times, right?
If I may, I just would like to jump in. That you said, like, is that the people in the office, they get more information, but I think if someone is working remote and joining a meeting, they get the privilege to be on a meeting and work on other things on the same time. When in-person meeting, you have to be like totally focused in the meeting, not playing with your computer at the same time. So I think for each place that you are, there's pros and cons, and I'm not sure which one is best.
I couldn't agree more. It's all trade-offs, there will be these significant trade-offs. I actually think we underestimate the trade-offs. But the sooner we understand what they are, I think the less painful it's going to be.
Interesting.
Absolutely. Okay, so our next question here, what are some best practices for setting goals for employees? Hung, we're actually going to start with you on this one.
No, man, I'm going to skip this one because I literally don't know is the answer. And also, I've been speaking way too much. So please pass it on to Avia and Avra.
Sure. Whoever would like to take it.
I'll make it short and sweet. I would say the biggest best practice is what the overlap is between the business results and what deliverables the organization wants to achieve, and what an employee's actual goals are, right, from a career and learning and development perspective.
Awesome. Avia?
I'd say again, I think I said this word before today, communication. Videos for goals, shout outs for goals, sharing the results, getting everybody on board through video, and that's what there is to do. But I think that the main thing about goals these days is understanding that goals needs to be flexible also.
Awesome. And I definitely agree about the flexibility of the goals. We do have a couple screenshots of the Bob platform while we're on best practices about goals. I think one of the nice things, and one of the things that a lot of companies track as well, is that you can have different types. So what we're actually looking at here is looking at a way to break down someone's personal goals versus their company goals, and then aligning those goals together to make sure that everyone in the organization is on the same page and is able to move forward with that same purpose. And then also in terms of having check-ins about the goals, another best practice, setting the goal is one thing, achieving the goal is another. So having that activity path that shows you, okay, this is the progress that we're making on the goal, and keeping the lines of communication open. And then also from someone in HR and their perspective, being able to see that holistic view of everybody's goals as well, I think is another thing that from what we've seen on the Bob side has been very beneficial in terms of goal tracking for a lot of organizations. Okay, so moving back to some of our questions here today. How do you set individual goals? Avia, we'll start with you on this one.
I'd say that individuals set their individual goals. One-on-one conversations, performance reviews, they set their own goals. They speak up. So I'd say how individuals set their individual goals.
Got it. Avra?
Yeah, I think that's important for sure. I think part of it too is again tracking that overlap between what are the business results that we want to achieve, and how can individuals' wants, needs, desires, dreams fit into that.
Right. Hung?
Just very quickly, I think we need like to be trained how to do this. Again, one of the main challenges I think with a shift of mode away from full on-premise is that suddenly all of us have a responsibility to self-direct and self-organize and to set our own goals. And that oftentimes, wasn't the case, because you could rely on your manager to come in and, do it for you. Or, if you're in a team, oftentimes you can get swept up in the team goals because, you're in the office, they're in the office, and everyone's saying, do this, then you end up doing that. So I think we need to be trained on how, if we are working in a remote setting, how do you become productive with all of the potential at-home distractions that might be happening? How do you focus? How do you kind of, to use Avra's excellent sort of point, how do you make sure that your activity is aligned back to what the company is doing? Because quite quickly you can swiftly find yourself being super busy, but then you step back and analyze it and you realize, 90% of what I'm doing actually does not move anything further forward for what the company actually needs for me to do. So, I think we need training on it. I'm no good at setting individual goals. I'm the last person to speak on it. I would love to get some training. So let's get some training out.
Awesome. We're going to stay on the subject of goals for the next question as well. How do we as HR leaders get managers and employees to engage with their goals? Avra, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. So, right, how good is a goal if it's not achievable? How good is a goal if you don't have the resources to actually follow through with it? So I think as HR leaders and really positioning HR as business partners, it's a question of doing a needs assessment and seeing, okay, we have all these goals. What resources do we have at our disposal to help individuals, teams, groups, divisions, organizations, fulfill on them, and how can we support managers to help facilitate that process, right? As using managers as the connection between individual goals and company goals.
Awesome. Avia?
I'm really trying to understand the question a little bit more. So maybe move to Hung and give me a moment.
Sure.
Don't throw that hot potato over to me, Avia. What's going on? Throwing it right back. No. Okay. Engagement. Quick rule. If you want to engage somebody, you have to involve them in the creation of the goal. If you're saying, hey, here's the goal, folks, and just rolling it out, guess what? You can get hyper resistance. This is just classic change management. If you want people to do stuff, you have to ask them before you've committed to do the thing. Really just say, okay, what do we want to achieve? Have that conversation as soon as you can with the employees and have them fully contribute to what those goals are. And if it turns out that their goals do not align with what the company is, then guess what? Maybe they're not the right folks for that business at this point, for your business at this point in time. But you've got to ask the question early, not roll it down after the fact.
Got it. Avia, we'll throw it back to you on this.
Yeah, I'm going to take it back. So I listen to what you say, Hung, and sometimes they're not on board because they don't have the bigger picture or all the information and the understanding why are these are the goals and not others. So again, communication. It's really important when you set goals to communicate why it's these goals and not others. Why are some things in focus and others are not? A lot of time managers and HR leaders forget that not all levels of hierarchy understand the reasons why some goals are chosen and other goals are not chosen. And I think it's really important to take that story and deliver it and communicate it down and sideways and remind each other why it's these goals and not others. Because I can say at Powtoon, we tend to forget. We really tend to forget and sometimes even fuss about why are we working toward this and not towards this, and someone needs to like shake everybody up and remind us the current story the current, not story, but the current circumstances that brought us to choose these goals.
Absolutely. And our next question, how can you measure goals and productivity? Hung, we'll start with you on this question.
I think you can measure most things. You can basically quantify a lot of the things that we believe are intangible. This is just breaking it down and kind of almost regression planning it. So let's say there is a goal. Can this be converted into a number? If not, then is it actually a goal or is it an aspiration? Goals usually are quantifiable. There should be a number against this to say that this is an achieved thing. And if you can't get that number, then I would suggest that the aim that you're going for is too intangible to be set and communicated to the rest of the staff. They need to know what that is. It's no different from training. We just watched the Olympics, for instance. You can't just go to a marathon runner and say, hey, run fast. You need to give that person milestones to say, you know what, after like 2 miles, you need to be hitting this number in terms of speed. Otherwise, you're not going to get to where you need to go at the end of the race. So I think it's one of the primary functions of management is to actually convert aspirations into concrete numbers that you can then communicate with the staff to say, here are the activities that are going to get us that way. So I don't know. I guess it's management 101 for me on this.
Got it. Avra?
Yeah, I 100% agree. What are goals without measurements and metrics and milestones? I think from a productivity perspective, it goes back to, what we were talking about of agility, right? If you had a goal in January of 2020, I guarantee you it didn't happen, right? When you think about like the goals that we set at the beginning of the year, unless you go back and, constantly remain agile and review them and see, are we on track? What do we need to get back on track? Or is this goal no longer possible? And sometimes we have to be agile and we have to deal with the change management as an organization in order to be able to set new goals and accomplish those.
Awesome. Avia?
I'd say that it's really before COVID, goals was the buzzword, goals, KPIs. And I think that goals are not sacred as they used to be. It's not anymore set it and forget it. We're more about changing the goals and being flexible. And I think it's more about that today. Things are changing so fast. I can say in our environment, they're changing so fast. we just have a meeting about setting goals, and then a few days later, it really is a different era, and goals are just, it's a bit different.
Awesome. So our next question here, probably one of the biggest questions of the day, is the hybrid work model here to stay? Avra, we'll start with you.
Yes. Going back to Hong's point earlier, what do we mean by hybrid? I think that's important for each organization to understand and to be as clear with candidates, across the pipeline of what the expectations are. But in general, I view hybrid as flexible, right? So I think flexible, there is no way that folks are going to go back to working in the office 5 days a week without any kind of, it's the before times of COVID. I don't think we're going to get back to that. And I think it's okay that we don't, right? We have demonstrated, I'm sure in our own lives and our own work that we can get work done in a lot of different settings and in a lot of different ways. And, that I think that should be celebrated. I don't think it's necessarily like a bad thing that we move forward in this way.
Absolutely. Hung?
Answer is yes, of course. However, I think we're going to hit a trough of disillusionment with hybrid, in the sense we're going to find out it's like super hard to actually do. And what will happen, I believe, is that a lot more companies that are putting off the decision to go full remote or full on-premise will end up making those decisions. And we're going to see a pretty a larger slice of the pie going full remote, a larger slice of the pie than we think going back to full on-premise. And then we've probably got the main group of organizations overall trying some element of hybrid. So the answer is yes, but it's going to be hard work.
Got it. Avia?
Yes, hybrid is here to stay. It's funny when employees in the company ask me if hybrid is here to stay, I tell them, like, hell yeah, your managers don't want to go back to be in the office all the time. So it's throughout the whole company. I don't want to go back to the office all the time. So the answer is totally yes, but I really think it's going to get even more complicated than hybrid. People are going to be starting to have maybe 2 workplaces to fill their week, and dividing their time because they're working from home. So now it's not only the time that you spend that employees spend in your workplace, they have another gig or workplace. So I think hybrid is here to stay, plus a few, I don't know, spin-offs it's going to take.
Perfect. So now we're going to move on to a few questions from our audience members. So the first question that we have here is, how are you rethinking the office space layout, especially as staff prefer to work virtually or remotely more often? Avra, we'll start with you on this.
Sure. Space planning continues to be a challenge for us. And so we are working consistently and constantly, really, with our facilities team to make sure that everyone who wants to be on site can be, whether that's in a hoteling space or in their own office. And it's hard. It's hard. That's the answer to the question.
Got it.
Avia?
It's hard. It's hard. Every day it's hard. And it's not something it's not something that I find a way and I have like a grasp and it's okay. No. After I feel everything's worked out, an employee will come to my office and say, I went to my working desk and someone took my screen, took my mouse. I don't have anything there. I feel my office space was taken away from me. It's not easy. It's not.
Got it.
That's a really interesting, just to follow up on Avia's point there, it's really interesting about the sense of territoriality that employees that have had the on-premise experience suddenly lose that if suddenly now no one has that space. I remember back in my office days, there was competition for the best seat, right? And it was like, yeah, I got the window seat.
The window.
Right. You're not giving that up. You fight tooth and nail for it. Now suddenly it's no longer there. Psychologically, this makes a big difference. And I think part of the thing that we'll encounter is that one of the challenges of hybrid is that the attractiveness of what we think the office is going to be, our memory of what the office is going to be, is not going to be replicated by hybrid. It's a new thing. We're not going to go back to having our own comfy seat. We're not going to go back to having the same old conversations because half the office won't be there. It's going to be really fascinating to see what companies do with real estate. I hope they're going to be creative with it. The opportunity certainly is there. I'd love to see companies go far out and start putting AV and sort of AR everywhere and VR everywhere. Why not? Let's create those spaces. But the truth is, I think what they'll do is crunch down the size of the office. And say, okay, we'll hot desk it. It's got half the office space. Let's get rid of it.
Got it. Okay. One last question from our audience here. How do we get managers to let go and trust their workforce, especially if there are issues with performance or productivity? Hung, I'll start with you on this question.
How do we get managers to do it? I think obviously they need training. Again, I think if we track how we've previously created managers, we haven't really supported anybody doing that. They've just been individual contributors. They've been promoted up and off they go. The reality of it is a lot of them are still under-equipped in terms of the skill set required to be a manager. But that it's disguised by the fact they were previously this hero individual contributor. But they may be terrible at actually making other people perform better. They may be terrible at understanding where there's a problem and people need support or they need a more discipline. So I think we need a retraining for managers. We also maybe need different people in as managers. We need to really break this idea that an individual contributor's next step has to be into management. If management turns into something like the whole holistic management of the person, which is what we now need to care about. You remember 2 years ago, it was considered a good thing to say to your employee, hey, leave your crap at the door when you come into the office. I don't want to deal with that. And it was considered professional not to bring your problems into the office. Remember that? And all of us felt, okay, I've got these issues, but you know what? I'm going to come in and do my 10-hour shift to 8-hour shift or whatever it is, and then I'm going to be a professional. Well, guess what? We can't ask that question of employees anymore because we're getting into their houses, workers intruded into their homes. So there's no way we can ask them not to bring their concerns when we're working with them. Managers are wholly under-equipped to deal with this. They have no skills whatsoever to deal with this. So I would look to see different types of skills coming into management. I want to see psychotherapists come in. I want to see coaches come in. I want to see people, organizational design people come in. There's no reason to think this should be individual contributor anymore. So I think the role of management is going to shift. I have not answered your question, Sean. You basically shouldn't be asking me questions anymore. I do beg your pardon. Okay, that's my sort of 2 cents on that issue. I failed to answer the question. I beg your pardon.
Okay, so I'm going to throw it to Avia next.
Yeah, in a way, I agree with you, Hang. Managers are not fully equipped for this 360 management. That's completely changed, and they do need help. I can say that in one of our departments, we added a project manager to work side by side with the manager to take off mostly management tasks, following up on tasks where the teams are in getting to their goals, being that admin person about management. So it's not taking away the leadership and the professionalism of the manager, but taking away the tasks of following up on productivity and looking for where the bottlenecks are and how do you get them loose. So adding a person to, and I think for each manager, that person could be different. In one team, it could be a project manager. In one person, it could be another HR person. But adding people to add to the manager's skill.
Okay. Avra?
Sure. Just that, how do you let go while continuing to support people, right? So I kind of, the phrasing of the question is interesting to me. But in general, trust is built, right? You don't wake up the next day with trust, or you don't just have one conversation and you build trust automatically. So I think that's the name of the game, and managers definitely need training on relationship management and just how to build relationships where employees do have psychological safety, because sometimes if the trust isn't there, they aren't going to come to you with the challenges they're having. So that could lead to the performance problems, right? It's going to the root of the source, and sometimes trust really is at the root.
Got it. Okay, well, that is all of the time that we have for today. We would like to thank Workable and our panelists, Avia, Avra, and Hung. Don't worry if you missed any of your questions. We will get back to you in the audience with answers from our panel as soon as possible. If you want more information on Bob as well, you can also feel free to request a demo right within the webinar panel. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.